Good morning and welcome to our council meeting for the 17th of March, again via Zoom as COVID goes through our community, but good thing is we are here together this morning. And a very warm welcome to Bobby from the St Paul's Presbyterian Church. Great to see you again, Bobby. Invite you to open our meeting in prayer and also just give us an update of what's happening with your people and how they're faring. Thank you.
Your worship and council members, it is a privilege to join you in your meeting this morning. Given the situation we are in at the moment and being an older congregation, we have most of our folks have decided to stay home, and so we're doing some of our services online and sending out emails. And we operate under the option to keep the numbers low, and so that is where we are at the moment. And so things are slowly, we're hoping that soon, once we begin to move into a different setting, things might just again be able to work out for us. And so that's where we are at the moment. Otherwise, like the other churches, we're just making sure things can be just be ticking along. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to open in prayer?
Right, I will do so now. Let's bow in prayer. God of justice and mercy, thank you for the gift of life and for the opportunity to serve the people of our district. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Help us to speak with clarity and restraint, and give us a spirit of service. Remind us that we are stewards of your authority and guide us to be the leaders that you want us to be. Therefore, I pray for our mayor, for the various levels of our administration, and in particular for this assembled council. I'm asking that you would graciously grant them wisdom to govern and a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony. I pray for the agenda set before them today. Please give an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit the district of Manawatu. It is in your most blessed name I pray. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you for joining us. Take care and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Right, so we move to apologies. I think there are none. We have a full team with us today. Now, just also to, if you don't have your hand raised electronically, just raise your hand and we'll do it that way as well today. There are no requests for leave of absence, so we can go straight to item 4, which is the confirmation of minutes on page 6. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Ford.
Your worship, I move that the minutes of the council meeting held 3rd of March 2022 be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Short. Councillor Short's here with us in the chamber. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Raise your hand. Thank you. Against? That motion is carried. Right, so we move to our agenda items. First up is for declarations of interest. Yes, we need to do that one. Item 5, declarations of interest. Any items on the agenda today, our members need to declare an interest. Councillor Ford.
I wish to declare a non-pecuniary interest in public excluded item 13C. The vendor has spoken to me about the matter, and I am involved in the potential sale of some of the vendor's other land to another party. If council agrees, I shall not vote, but I do suggest that I stay online, as I may be able to help clarify matters that may arise. But if council would prefer that I withdraw completely, I will.
Thank you. That is noted for that item. Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No? Thank you. Right, we move to item 6, which is public forum. Very warm welcome to Amanda, and I see Leanne is there as well. So welcome, and you're going to talk to us about a new exciting look that you're proposing for the Manawatu Business Awards and how Manawatu District may be able to support you and be involved. So I'll hand it over to you.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to be with you. We would have obviously loved to have been with you in person were that possible, but this is, as Mayor Helen said earlier, is what it is, and it's the best thing that we can do. At least we can all still do this together. I do have with me our new chair of the chamber, who joined us at the end of last year as chair. So Steve Davey, he's actually sitting at Leanne's screen, so it's actually Steve and not Leanne that you've got in that place as well. So let me just make sure I'm clicking through this. Okay, so that just introduce Steve to you. So hopefully my screen is now sharing at the appropriate time, not too early, and you can all see that up there. Just really quickly before we get on to the Manawatu Business Awards, I just thought I'd take the opportunity, so please indulge me here, to just say a couple of words just about some of the other things quickly that we know that we've been doing. And you can see those are the quick topics I wanted to cover. So in terms of rebranding, we did rebrand at the end of last year as the Manawatu Business Chamber. So we wanted a look that was a little bit more fresh, a bit more relevant for us and our members, and it further aligns with other chambers around the country, of which there's actually 31 chambers. And the Pantone colour that we've used in here, in collegiality, we've actually used one of Cedar's colours, which is Puname, very similar to what we did have, but we thought that using something from their green palette was also very sort of in keeping with our regional look. We believe this strengthens the visibility of our chamber and our message and better reflects our region's identity. So some of the key things that we've been doing in the last couple of months or 6 months or so is business support through the pandemic. As you can imagine, our phones have been pretty busy, and our message has been sort of simple, reiterating government's message as well, and directing people to websites, because with goalposts moving so quickly, there's often misinformation out there. We've been doing quite a lot of ad hoc support with businesses as well, things that they just need help with and they need a point of contact. We have continued the Buy Local campaign, and we're urging people to buy local in our region. It has become definitely more difficult in this part of the pandemic, largely due to the fact in our region we've got a lot of government departments and local governments who are mandating through their risk assessments to keep their workers at home, which has reduced the number of people that are actually out shopping and buying across the region. And also there's been some central government issues with the CFA and people being less inclined to spend. That's caused some issues as well for our hard hit hospitality and retailers. And we have heard that last week that the government are making amendments to that CFA Act, which is encouraging, and we've been lobbying in that space as well. And of course, with Buy Local, the escalating costs are increasing for everybody. With advocacy, we have regular meetings by Zoom, of course, with Ministers Nash and Robertson, with the other chambers to raise issues that are of business interest. So particularly, we were instrumental with the resurgence payments back in August and September, getting those brought forward, and also having all businesses and all employees classified as essential and critical workers. We were really, we needed business to get back up and running. We sit on a number of advisory groups around the region, including skills and talent, and we have a good relationship with organisations such as Federated Farmers as well. Driving our region's profile, that's a continuum for us, and we work closely with NZCCI, which is our, the national body, to raise regional presentation in general across the country, and from our perspective, obviously pushing the Manawatu agenda very much as well. So, on to the Business Awards. The Chamber have undertaken to deliver the Manawatu Business Awards in 2022. It's going to be a revitalised format, and we're very excited to be bringing these back. Business Awards are a significant event. They're designed to recognise, promote and celebrate business success in our region. The awards especially will be a highlight of the year and something to look forward to after 2 extraordinary years. Business awards do play an important role in promoting and strengthening economic development within a region, and successful businesses provide employment opportunities and contribute directly to the GDP of a region. Appreciation and recognition are powerful motivators, leading to an increase in performance, productivity, morale, employer retention, and overall satisfaction. Business awards showcase to other regions the vitality and strength of the business community within a region and can help to attract inward investment both nationally and internationally. You'll note here that the finals date is November the 4th and preparation is well underway by the team. The intention is to make this the most prestigious, black-tie, professional, aspirational event the region has seen. The Chamber has the capability to deliver this, given the experience the team have with awards delivery and witnessed by the Dinner of Provenance that we've delivered since 2018. The finals event will alternate because it'll be a biannual event between Palmerston North venue and a fielding venue. It's really key to us that this is a Manawatu viewed awards. So what we're asking from Council, from MDC, is we're looking for financial support this year, given the importance of these awards. We're suggesting that the MDC support the special recognition awards, which have in the past been associated with mayoral type awards for business awards. And those 2 awards are the Spirit of Manawatu and the Lifetime Service Award for Manawatu. We are also approaching PNCC, and we have actually approached PNCC to also support these awards and jointly work together, given that these had been delivered through CEDA in previous years, but that support has been withdrawn for them to deliver. The business awards will be high profile with media coverage, and also the journey for the businesses involved will be hugely important. So as mentioned previously, these awards celebrate regional success, and it is absolutely critical and essential for us to have support from across the region, with the majority of the funding coming through commercially. We acknowledge the contribution of our rural sector and the vision that your council at MTC have in the area towards rural. And we believe that these awards will definitely reflect that as well, and that's part of what we want to see and be seen to be occurring with them. We haven't come with any details of what it could look like from a financial perspective, but we've got some very clear indicators, but I'm happy just to take some questions and discuss that either openly, but didn't want to start with that, or to have a discussion with you or a smaller group at, through some other forum. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you. And, I think the timing for this is excellent. We've talked about the need for people to reconnect once we get out the other side of COVID and we can meet face to face. And this, particularly for our business community, to bring them together and celebrate. So well done on this initiative. And let's open it for questions from the team. Any questions of Amanda? Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Amanda, for your presentation this morning. Just sort of regarding I can definitely see the civic support there. Is there any idea around costings for this at all?
Yeah, we've we just unmuted Steve. Actually, I might put you on the same screen as me.
Yep.
So I'm just bringing Steve in case, because I don't want to be the one that does all the talking, which unfortunately sometimes I do, so you might have to zip me.
Just need to mute Leanne's computer.
We'll take it away. She's being sent away. Sorry about that. Yes, we've done costing already on what it would look like for that. We know the exact cost. It's going to be around 150k to deliver the full awards, and that. But we will be selling tickets as well. But yeah, we've done the full budget on it.
Okay, so Leanne, just to take that a step further, so I'm assuming you'll be able to supply council through application to our event fund, or depending what level it is, about how council decides to support it. I take it from what you've explained this morning, there's potentially different levels that we could consider.
That's correct. Our sort of entry level really is around the 5K benchmark for sponsoring a category, and around the 10K for the Mayor Awards, which will be actually two awards.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Thank you. Just a question, the sort of the judging criteria and the basis of the awards, will it be similar to the previous Manawatu awards, or do you have something different? Are we looking at the the success of the business, including the financials, profitability, etc., or is it or is there some other concept?
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty robust process. Do you want to comment on that, Steve?
Yeah, we're actually thinking that, I mean, in essence, this isn't, whilst primarily it's about an evening to celebrate, there's actually a lot more behind business awards than that. I mean, one of them is we'd like to engage the business community in helping judge the category, so they can learn by actually being out and actually judging businesses that aren't direct competitors. And also, I think a lot of businesses that enter awards actually want feedback as to what they're doing well and what they can improve on. So that's all part of that process. So a lot of community engagement is part of that, whereas the evening is the highlight of it all. But there's a huge flow on benefits from these awards than just an evening from it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is important that businesses get that feedback and they can use that to grow. Now I saw another hand. Yes, Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, it's sort of a follow-up from Councillor Ford's question. Are you going to be inviting entries, or are you going to be seeking nominations?
Both. People can self-nominate, or they can be nominated. So either, but we'd like as many as possible to enter, and we will ensure that anybody that is an entrant gets good feedback as well, so that it's not just to open the door and I want to do it type of entry. It'll be a robust process and fair back for the businesses as well.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's going to be more of a a judged formal type competition, a business competition versus a celebration event.
It's going to be both, but there is going to be a formal and robust process of judging as well. That's absolutely key.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's important up front, that the businesses understand even before the nominations open, perhaps about some guidelines around how the judging will work, feedback and criteria, etc. I think that's quite important to get a buy-in from the business community.
Definitely.
Any further questions or comments? No. Thank you, Amanda and Steve. Welcome, Steve. Sorry I didn't introduce you. This is exciting, and we look forward to following this up. I'll get Lynn, our GM in this area, to make contact with you, Amanda, and we look forward to a formal application that council can have a look at and see how we can support. And meantime, we'll put the 4th of November in our diaries.
Thank you so much. We're really looking forward to it. We're really excited to be working with you on this as well. It's going to be great for the region.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you so much too.
Okay, so we now move to item 7. This is the Poppy Places Trust. Very warm welcome to Steve. And Steve, have you got Evan with you there this morning?
I see I think he's on. There we go. Evan, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. This is a project that's been in discussion behind the scenes for some time, and something that the city, or nationally, the National Poppy Trust, and something the city embarked on. And there's been discussions, and Councillor Quarry here at MDC has been our liaison councillor on this. So we felt that now we've done enough background work, it's time to bring this project to the table and see if we can gather support for it and potentially get it underway. But it is important that we understand what the project is, how it works, the criteria, and what's involved financially, etc. So I'm going to hand it over to Steve. Thank you so much. We do have a copy of your presentation.
Thank you, Nolan, appreciate that. And Evan, I'll bring you in as and when I need. I'll just share the screen for that presentation and see if it all works. Right, I think we are okay. So look, thank you very much, and it's appreciated. The Poppy Places Trust is I guess a legacy project which started here in Palmerston North back in 2014, and have been able to successful get Palmerston North organised. And Evan has been done all the hard work with regard to the archival side of things. I guess the important thing here, of course, is it's the Poppy Places is about places of remembrance. There are a lot of people went off to war, many died, and all over New Zealand they're being remembered in different shapes and forms, particularly in memorials and so on. So the Poppy Places Trust fits within that category. My comment is it's a project worthy of those who have served our country, and we just have to acknowledge that. This is the list that Evan, you may want to talk to, that has been looked at for the Fielding area and more broadly. In the Manawatu area, we've got just over 66 and Linton's 39. Evan, you may make some comments on the various streets of there.
Yes, I believe there's 7 in Fielding and 4 in Martin. The initial research that I have done is around 4 of those streets, which have been easily found within the archives at Archive Central using the MBC records over here. So there's another 3 or 4 that need to be more thoroughly researched, which would be through probably visiting down at NZDF and looking at service records back down there.
Thank you, and thank you for that work you've done on that. And so, councillors, you've got a copy of that. As I said, all the work has been researched and done, and Evan's done that for the last couple of years. The priority from my point of view is to endeavour to get the council to recognise it, provide the capital, and commit to the project as a legacy project for the Manawatu district. The small notes there, but down the bottom, effectively, some of the costs that are provided, how the Palmerston North City Council have been how the cost to install the signs would be. So it is reasonably minimal when you're talking $120 a sign, but it's more than that. It's about a commitment to the project, the website, the long-term project around it, and acknowledgement within this district council. So really, you've just got to make some decisions. There's a huge work done over in Palmerston North here with regard to Memorial Park, you may have seen, and I'm doing some other work with regard to both Ohakea and Linton. Just some examples: Kippenberg Drive, of course, the original one, Russell Street, which is where I live, and so on. So that's how the signs would look, and recognition of those that have passed on and historical moments. So where else besides streets mentioned for the Poppy be placed? Well, that's a discussion that I'm going to have with Evan as to where others, other than the ones we've mentioned, could actually be sorted. The other one that I'm working on just for in the region is RNZF base Ohakea. Whilst they don't have any of the streets approved, the proposal is that Ohakea could receive a poppy, and we're doing some planning work with regard to the possibility of placing, I've made a presentation regarding the placing of the signs at Memorial Park, similar to those at base Ohakea. So that's something that's working on. So is the project worthy of proceeding with? It's your decision. We can provide all the background support. I've spoken to Terry Macbeth from New Zealand Poppy Places Trust, and he's very supportive of what you could be doing. And I'll leave it for you to have a conversation. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those. And just remember that Poppy Day is on the 22nd of April.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen and Evan. So am I right in thinking that we can't just say, oh, there's a street that we found some information? We actually have to apply to the Poppy Places Trust with the information supporting evidence as to why the street justifies having a poppy attached to it?
Yes, that's true. And Evan's done considerable work with regard to these ones. These information is stored in the example of Palmerston North City Council on their website, and people can go and see why it's there, but it must be presented to the New Zealand Poppy Places Trust board, and they sign it off appropriately. But of course, by the time it gets to there, there's been a lot of work done.
Thank you. And I see this as potentially a really good project to engage our community with it. So are we able to, you know, if we went ahead with this, are we able to then open it up to our community and ask them to nominate places, streets, etc., and give us information as well as what we can find from archives?
Absolutely, and I've done a couple of presentations in Fielding, and I get that feedback. People come to me and say, did you know, did you know? We don't know everything. The community must be engaged. This is a community project, and it provides a good acknowledgement of those that have passed before us and the effort they've put in.
Excellent, thank you. If you could stop sharing your screen, and then all of our members will come up on the screen. There may be some more questions. Councillor Quarry.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Steve and Evan, for coming along this morning. I have to apologise to you both. I've been dragging the chain in regard to this, and so my apologies are there. Thank you for the work that you've done. There are a number of other areas throughout the Manawatu. We also have a Soldiers Road, and yeah, there's a couple of other places of interest that people served in the First World War. So thank you for that. I'm sure the ball will get rolling now. So once again, my apologies.
The other aspect, just briefly, of course, the defence capital, as we talk about with Haki and Linton, it's also important that the people that actually work within defence know what's going on with this history also. So it hits a number of areas: community, defence staff, and acknowledgement across the country that Manawatu care.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Well, thank you, Worship. Councillor Casey had his mitt up manually before me.
Thank you. You've got the floor. Carry on.
Well, thanks. Look, I'll get into trouble, I suppose, for not asking a question, but thanks, Steve, for that presentation. I wholeheartedly support this. I think it's fantastic that we take any opportunity to remind younger generations about the sacrifice that so many of these people made. Interestingly enough, just reading a bit of the history of Copper Cane the other night is an interested aviator, and you know, fantastic feat for young New Zealanders to become the first ace in the RAF in the Second World War. Not that we, you know, it's an achievement, and you know, such a tragic way that he ended his life in his service in that conflict. So look, I fully support what the Trust's aiming to achieve here, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Worship. It's just more of a comment. Steve, I can't believe it's been nearly 7 years since we toured Gallipoli and then on to the northern, you know, the French fights in Western France. I just fully support this. This is quite a profound thing, and I just fully endorse this. I don't see it as being an expensive exercise, probably more of a trying to get through that administration, but I certainly fully support this. Spending time overseas has been quite profound. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Thank you, and yeah, congratulations to the Poppy's Places Trust. Completely support it. Would like us to get on with it promptly. My question is just a case of perhaps questioning Andrew Street. In that part of town, we have an Elizabeth Street, a Philip Place, a Charles Street, an Anne Street, Andrew Street. We don't have an Edward Street, but I think that's because he was a bit young. So my understanding is that Andrew Street was named after Prince Andrew. I'm not sure if we're still naming things after him, but anyway. So I may be wrong, but I just question it.
Thank you. I'll defer to
Thank you. That's something good that we can double check, because it does have to go to the Trust for approval.
Sure.
Phil, Councillor Marsh.
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Steve and Evan. Yeah, so fully endorse it at my end as well. Just a question, Steve. Palmerston North, have they done anything with the maraes? Because I would say that we would need to acknowledge them as well.
Yep.
They're all signposted rather than individuals, admittedly, because we don't have the street names. But certainly our maraes need to be included within this.
Phil, through the Manawatu Defence Heritage Group, we are now looking at more places of interest opposed to street names. And so there's a number on the project where the poppy is deserted on a building or a site or a locate as opposed to a street. So it's sort of the next level. It's very similar to my comments regarding Ohakea and the fact that the poppy deserves the base deserves a poppy as opposed to streets within it.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Councillor Short, did you have a question? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Any further questions there? Great. So this is the opportunity to receive that presentation. Thank you again. And yes, as you can hear, there's really good commitment around this, particularly around Ohakea and getting them involved in it and being in our patch. I think that's even more appropriate. So we will take this, Lynn and her team will pick this up and bring that formally back to council, and so that we can have a discussion and decide on whether to support it or not, and then get into it. Subject to approval, Steve, the next step is what?
Well, the next step is simply to sit down with your people and acknowledge what we've done this morning. The process of the names and so on that Evan's already done the work on can be submitted to the Poppy Places Trust, and then it's the mechanics of the building of the sign and the placement, and then the public acknowledgement and publicity that you can actually take from that. So sign it off, give us a yell, and we'll get stuck into it with you.
Excellent, appreciate that. Thank you so much. And you know, I'm pretty excited about it and a great opportunity to engage our community. So again, thank you for your time today. Take care and have a good day.
Thank you and good morning.
Thank you. Right, we move to item 8, notification of late items, and I am notifying the following item of late business for consideration. This is the draft submission Bioplant Manawatu NZ Limited air discharge consent. The purpose for the item is to seek council's discussion and approval for the proposed submission to the Bioplant Manawatu New Zealand Limited air discharge consent application. And the reason the item is not included on the agenda for the meeting is due to the time frame of the notification of the hearing. And the consideration of this item cannot be delayed into a later meeting due to the submission period closing on the 31st of March 2022. So therefore I move that the item draft submission Bioplant Manawatu New Zealand Limited air discharge consent be accepted as a late item of business. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Casey, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you. We will bring that up in the late item. So moving on with our agenda, we're up to recommendations from committees, and the first one we're on page 12. And this is the recommendations from our Community Development Committee team regarding priority services. And so, Lynn, I'll hand it over to you to introduce our topic.
Thank you, Your Worship. This paper is about the priority services schedule, which assists the Community Development Assessment Panel to evaluate the funding proposals. And it is being considered by Council Workshop, and then it is being considered by the Community Development Committee. And so they have making this recommendation to Council to adopt the revised schedule. So I'll hand it over for any questions.
Thank you. So yes, it is self-explanatory. Councillor G. Taylor, as the chair of that committee, is there anything else you'd like to highlight there?
Look, I think the changes are shown in red. There was minimal changes made. Councillor Short was the one that sought for us to reword. I can't remember what we changed the word from, but we changed it to opportunities, which was pretty much one of our only changes to this piece of work. Happy to take questions as they come.
Thank you. There's a couple of additional items in red on page 14. The word community has been added around the events. Hand it over to Councillor Short. You may need to come and use my laptop so they can hear. No, because then it would interfere with this one.
The change that I requested hasn't been made in the document. It was to replace the word elderly with seniors.
Apologies. We will make that adjustment.
Thank you. That is correct. My recollection from that meeting, and that makes it appropriate. So we can make that adjustment. No problem at all. Is there any other questions or comments in regards to this?
Just poor audio for me, Your Worship. Just Councillor Short, I couldn't pick up what she had changed to what.
The change that Councillor Short requested at the community development meeting was the word elderly to be changed to the word seniors.
Brilliant. Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with that in mind, there is a recommendation on page 12 and suggesting that we add that change for a word. So Councillor G. Taylor, is this something that you'd be keen to move?
Yes, I am happy to move the recommendation on page 12 that the council adopt the revised schedule of priority services which link to the actions contained within the community development strategy to assist the community development assessment panel in evaluating priority service proposals submitted by organisations for community development funding.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Short. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you. And just noting that change of word from elderly to seniors. Thank you. So we now move to page 21. And this is the appointment to committee vacancies. And this is just following up from the resignation from Councillor Humphrey. There's a couple of vacancies that leaves which need to be considered. Now, my question is either to the CE or to Ali. Given the time frame, etc., are we required by legislation to actually fill these vacancies, or can we agree to leave them vacant?
You can agree to leave them vacant. You don't have.
Thank you. So the advice is that we can agree to leave these vacant, or we can fill them if there is a wish to do so. So I'll open that up for discussion. Kathy, is there anything else that you wanted to add to that? She may not be with us. Okay. So it's seeking to appoint a councillor to the Community Development Committee and also to Audit and Risk. So I guess the discussion there, I know I've had discussions with Councillor Campbell around Audit and Risk, and there was a thinking there that given the only a couple of meetings left until the elections, that it would be okay to leave that as vacant. But Councillor Campbell, I'll ask you to comment officially.
I'd agree with those comments, Your Worship. Yeah, as you said, there's only 2 meetings left. The numbers on that committee are adequate, and the members are very capable members. So if anybody else wishes to join the committee, they'd be more than welcome, but it's not essential.
Thank you. And The same applies, Councillor G. Taylor, in regards to the Community Development Committee. As the chair, do you have a thought on that?
Not overly. I'm pretty much the same as Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. So I guess it goes back to the question, there are vacancies in those two committees. Are there any elected members who have a desire to become part of those teams? Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Noting I'm already part of those teams, but I have noted over this term that the Community Development Committee, all it takes is 1 or 2 members to be away or to have a conflict of interest, which is quite common, and we actually don't have a quorum. So I would probably support another councillor coming on board to that committee just for that sake of continuity and process. However, I endorse where Councillor Campbell is coming from with audit and risk, but just noting those times with community development where we have been light on the ground.
Thank you. So given that for us to be able to put that forward today, we would need a nomination of a councillor who is interested in sitting on the community development team, or audit and risk for that matter. So do we have any takers for either of those? Okay, not seeing any hands raised there. Any nominations that we'd like to pass for that? No? Okay, so we don't have any names to put forward for those, so we could move a recommendation that we do not fill those 2 positions, as well as the Hearings Committee, which is recommendation 3. So we'll go to the recommendations on page 21, and there are 3 currently, although we could, if we're choosing not to fill community development and audit risk, we could add those 2 committees' names to recommendation 3. So do I have a mover and a seconder for those recommendations?
And I'm sorry, Your Worship, that wasn't quite clear. We'd have to do 1 and 3 together, would we not? Why would we include 2 in there?
Yes, that is correct. We would, if we're choosing not to fill the vacancy, we could add that into number 3 for those 2 specific committees.
Yeah.
Are you happy to move that?
Yes, Your Worship, I'm happy to move that.
Happy to second.
Thank you. So that's moved Councillor Casey, seconded Councillor Marsh, that we adopt recommendation 1 and recommendation 3, adding that the vacancies on the Community Development Committee and Audit and Risk Committee not be filled. So any further discussion, comments? Otherwise, I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Motions are carried. Thank you. And I did jump an item, so we need to go back to item 10. This is the minutes from other committees. It is for your information only, and that's on page 10. Councillor G. Taylor, is there anything in there that you'd like to highlight before we open it for questions? Page 17 we're on. You're on mute.
That would help. Jeevers, that's usually for the older generation doing that trick. Hey,
comes to us all.
Now, with this meeting specifically, I guess one thing that I would like to acknowledge with my youth council hat on, as well as chairperson of the Community Development Committee, is that we had Zoe Lister come and report to us on the youth council and how they're tracking and what's happening there, and we also accepted their performance report for the last year. So that was really cool to have Zoe come in and present to us, and it's so impressive to have young people like that in our district and involved with council. I I think we're just very lucky to have someone like that. Obviously, we went through the priority services and funding accountability report. So no, just a standard meeting, to be fair.
Thank you. And whoops, I've just lost everybody.
Andrew needs to stop. Councillor Quarry needs to stop sharing the screen. That's why it's been taken over.
Councillor Quarry, could you please unshare your screen? There we go. Thought there was gremlins in the system. It's only Councillor Quarry.
However, Your Worship, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Quarry on his technical skills in that matter.
Thank you. I also want to congratulate Councillor G. Taylor and recognise her role as in her appointment as chair for the Community Development Committee. And absolutely agree. The presentation we had from Zoe was outstanding. And Councillor Quarry, you cannot look at those other screens on the same computer screen because then it pops up for us. Okay, so that was for our information. Was there any questions in regards? Councillor Short has a question or a comment.
A comment. I'd like it to be recorded the success of the library for assisting our community with downloading of vaccine passes. This came out of the Manawatu Health and Wellbeing Group and our concern for those in the community that weren't very good with technology. Really like to acknowledge, Lynn, the work that the staff did, because at peak they were getting 150 people per day, right at the time also when the Ministry of Health website kept crashing because of volume. So I'd just like it to go on record that we really appreciate the extra effort that the library made for our community.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'll be sure to pass that on to Adie and Warwick.
Excellent, yes, and it's great to see everybody going above and beyond when in such challenging times. So right, now we can get back into order. We're up to page 26, 11.2, the Manawatu District Quarterly Economic Update to December 2021. Those of us who were involved in Joint Strategic and the Economic Focus Group, we've had the opportunity to talk about economic updates in some detail, so it's great to be able to bring it formally to Council. Over to you, Stacey.
Morena, Your Worship and councillors. I have tried to add a little bit of new information in here. As you will all know, conditions are changing very quickly economically across the world and in New Zealand. So I have tried to make it a little more interesting, as I know we've had a lot of economic reporting recently. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone see that? No, I'll just push it.
Here it comes. Yes, we've got it. Just need to put it to full screen.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, right, we'll get started. And please feel free to ask questions or discussion during the presentation. And I do apologise if my builders in the background are being noisy. They're trying not to be. So, okay, so we had very strong economic performance in the district over the year to December 2021. Really, our agriculture sector is going from strength to strength, but also our record public and private investment. Very strong employment and population growth as well, which has really driven the economic performance of the district. We have a very positive outlook for our main primary industries, in particular dairy and beef and lamb over the 2021-22 and 2022-23 season. So that's going from strength to strength, partially based on international conditions, which we'll talk about in more detail. So the strength and confidence in the local economy and the high level of employment is being reflected very strongly within our robust retail expenditure data and also new registrations of both commercial and private vehicles in the district. We've also had very strong visitor spending based on the new model that's come out of MBIA around domestic tourism spending. So that's been very positive as well, and also helped to support jobs across the economy, in particular in the service industries. So house price growth does continue quite strongly over the year, but we are seeing signs of slowing in the market. So we're going to take a deep dive into that as well. Rental increases in the district still incredibly strong over the year and outpacing New Zealand growth substantially. And that's across lower quartile, median and upper quartile rents. So that's an area of focus as well. Labour force indicators reflect that incredibly tight labour market, which is really impacting on our businesses and their ability to expand to meet demand in the market. And that was reflected quite strongly within the recent CEDA survey that they did to December last year. So we're not seeing any let up there. In fact, it's tightening even further from what we'd seen previously. Hot on the headlines at the moment is around the cost of living. So we're at a 32-year high in terms of our CPI. Inflation's being driven by both domestic and global factors. So that's for last year. Those CPI figures are likely to get a lot worse, with recent forecasts from ANZ coming out at 7.4% to over the year to June. And that is quite volatile at the moment. So it will be, we'll be watching that closely to see what that impact is on our households and businesses. So our indicators do really reflect the resilience of our local economy relative to many other places, and a lot of that is because of our public sector employment and our very strong primary and value-added manufacturing food producers in the district. There are global factors and domestic factors that will impact on certain parts of our community in particular, and there are vulnerabilities growing in our lower to middle income, people on fixed incomes and businesses that are highly leveraged, etc. So we have a lot of factors that enhance our resilience, but we also do have those vulnerabilities as well, which are important to keep in mind for our community. So Manawatu district is the regional GDP growth across the Manawatu-Whanganui region. So we're sitting at 9.2% over the year. Of course, that is coming off a very low base from 2020, but still is much greater than the national average at 5.5% and the region at 7.6%. I'll put a few examples here of different GDP rates across the country. Kawerau very strong at 15.5%. That was the strongest in the country. Auckland sitting at 3.7%, of course, because of the time spent in lockdown in that part of the country. New Plymouth doing very well at 9.3%, so similar to us. As we can see there, Palmy is 7.8%, so actually did reasonably well considering they do have quite a bit of dependency as well on hospitality and the service sector and also international education. But they also have a very strong public sector there, which drives economic performance in their economy as well as ours. So Ruapehu 6.1, they got hit quite hard, of course, because they are reliant on tourism, much more than what the rest of the region is. Rangitikei strong at 8.9, Tararua Horowhenua doing well also, and Otrahonga there sitting there at the bottom of New Zealand at 2.3%, and again, very strong dependency on international tourism with Waitomo Caves, etc. And also, I do believe that Hobbiton is also within their area. So this is a horrible table, and I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I just want to have I want to do a deep dive into the value of food production in the local economy. So when we talk about GDP, it is often quite confusing because the value of intermediate inputs are actually removed, and it only measures the value that we add to our intermediate inputs through the process of production. So here in the district, the value of food production to the local economy, the direct value, I should say, is around the $310 million. But when we look at the value it generates across our wider economy, and that's both the businesses that we purchase from, our support industries, as well as the increase in household incomes and expenditure from that, then it's much greater than that. So it's more, it's sitting at the $495 million. But we can also estimate the value of implied direct output from this. So the sector across our region is estimated, or across our district, is estimated to generate $900 million in total output. So it's a very important sector for our region. It's got strong multipliers, and it generates a whole lot of economic activity across other parts of our economy, in particular road transport, also professional services such as accounting, finance, insurance, and other areas as well. I think another one also is rental and hiring. So I do want to come back to council and talk about this more in terms of the impacts and because it is very important for our economy. So just had a little bit a look at some of our main industries there. So dairy cattle farming is definitely the one that generates the most in terms of GDP and also the value of direct output. So I'm just going to move people's faces over. So dairy cattle farming, type 2 GDP was 141 million. So very strong there. So that's just looking at the different impacts across those main industries. And there's also employment there as well, with sheep, beef, cattle and grain farming are the highest. And again, we can't break it down any further than this for the IO models. Meat and meat product manufacturing also very, very important to our district economy. So we've got very strong conditions for our agri-food producers currently, in particular our dairy and sheep and beef. So we can see there that the annual increase in commodity prices was 19.6% and sheep and beef 18.7%. This is US dollars. We've also had a weakening of the New Zealand dollar relative to the US, so that will also support returns for our producers. And the Fed actually increased their interest rate. The US central bank increased their interest rate this morning by 25 basis points and have also signalled a stronger tightening cycle than previously indicated, which should actually reduce our dollar further and provide additional revenue for our producers. So overall, the price index was up 2.3%. Over the week. So that was the week ended 11th of March, and that's the latest information to be available. So the strong forecast for commodity prices for goods produced in the district moving forward. Beef and veal is forecast to move 15.1% up to the end of January 2022. Lamb and mutton up 8.2% over that period as well. So dairy values are forecast to increase 9.7% over that time. So the outlook for our producers is very strong and will be well supported over the season and next. We are forecast to become more competitive as well because our production is grass-fed, whereas much of the world uses food, uses animal feed which is severely impacted by the rising costs from corn and wheat coming out of Russia and the Ukraine. So those markets there are very constrained at the moment. And for that reason, prices are forecast to rise very high and we will be far more competitive due to the fact that we won't be confronted with those costs as much as producers who use those feeds. And the US is citing that as well. There is a forecast increase in on-farm costs, however, of around 4.5%. And a lot of that is due to fertilizer costs and they're also increasing. But the output or the value of output that and the price that we receive for that output is forecast to increase much higher. So that's very positive looking forward for 2022 and 2023. So our population indicators have also been incredibly strong over the year. So which is really a reflection of the strong economic activity here and employment opportunities and lifestyle opportunities in the district and across the wider region as well. So the number of school children in the district reached over 5,000 for the first time in 2021. So it's an increase of 132 from the year before, or 2.7%. And that is versus New Zealand at 0.03%. As you can see, we were stronger than anywhere else across the region, with Ruapehu behind us at 2%. Rangataki took a hit, of course, because of the international students, etc., that didn't come into the country for over that 2021 period. So our local health enrolments have also grown quite strongly at 1.9%. So that again is stronger than anywhere else across the region or across wider New Zealand. So the population growth alongside those other strengths that we have is driving economic activity in our district relative to really most other parts of New Zealand. So low unemployment, yeah, we've got crazy low unemployment and we're hearing it all the time about our businesses not being able to get the staff and resources that they need. It is really quite an issue. Now, I don't know if anyone else has seen what the government are proposing to do. We know what they're proposing to do around tourism into the country, but whether or not they're going to loosen up their access to foreign workers, because it really is a crisis point across most of the country. And as we can see from our figures, our unemployment rates are much lower than most of New Zealand.
Stacey, can I just bang in a quick question there?
Sure.
I was reading some data just a couple of days ago on the low unemployment rate, but that data also showed that consequently we were also showing the highest number of people on benefits in that corresponding time.
Yeah, it is coming down. It is coming down quite well on the job seeker benefit data. So we are seeing a decline there, but we've seen some interesting trends, which I've included within this as well. So we've seen a very, if I go on to the next slide, actually, because it's on there. So we had a total of 840 job seeker benefits over the year in December 2021. So it's down 108. So that's quite positive, down 11.4% for us and down 11.3% across New Zealand. So work-ready job seekers have declined down 30.9% compared with 21.1% New Zealand. And of course, within the job seekers data, we also have those that are suffering with health and disability issues that are not considered work ready. So health conditions is what we're seeing here quite sharply, up 81, which is 24.1% compared with 5.1% across New Zealand. So I'm very interested in that statistic and why we're seeing that sustained much higher increase in people that are suffering with those health conditions relative to other places. Psychological and psychiatric conditions up 49, so that's 29.3% up within our district versus 3.9% for New Zealand. So again, yeah, very interesting data, but concerning at the same time, and definitely something we need to keep a close eye on. Now, one piece of information I found fascinating between the September and December quarter was the increase in job seekers by ethnicity. So as we can see there, between September and December, the number of New Zealand European job seekers increased from 459 to 582. So that's an increase of 26.8%, up 123. We also, well, in contrast, the number of job seekers of Māori descent actually declined by 12. Pacific Islander job seekers, of which we have very few of, as you can see, did increase by 12. So there was an increase there. And job seekers across all other ethnicities fell as well. So that very sharp increase I find quite fascinating. And really the only thing that I can think of that would explain such a sharp increase, and we're seeing it nationally, not just here in the district, is actually the impact of the vaccine mandates and people actually choosing to lose their jobs, leave their jobs or losing their jobs as a result of that. So they're highly skilled workers, a lot of these people, and I think, over time it'd be great to see them able to rejoin the workforce because we really need them, looking at those figures. So with job seekers in terms of age group as well, we saw a decline across all age groups apart from the older age group. And then there again, I wonder about psychological or psychiatric mental health issues and health conditions actually impacting on that, especially with the stress of the last couple of years and the uncertainty that's been created and rising costs, etc., which are putting additional stress on people. So I'll just quickly give you the figures for national ethnicity of job seekers. So nationally, European job seekers increased by 38.5%. So it was actually up 25,683 in that final quarter of 2021. So it's quite a stark result. And again, nationally, Māori job seekers actually declined by 4%, increase in Pacific Island job seekers by 20%, and 18% decline in job seekers across all other ethnicities. So we're seeing those trends play out across the country. Yeah, very interesting. So we move on to building consents. So building consents hit a new record over the year to January 2022, so breaking the record of December 2021. So they rose to $224.4 million from $222 million in December, just a slight increase, but again, another record year. New dwelling consents were up to 258. So that is a record in terms of our time series data that we have access to, and I suggest due to conditions prior to that time that would be an overall record. So one interesting thing, however, is what sort of houses that we're building. So we know that there's a strong demand for 1 and 2 bedroom homes for older persons, senior persons, and also as affordable housing. So what we're seeing at the moment with the housing that's coming through is only about 11% of the new builds are for those 1 and 2 bedroom homes. 3 bedroom homes make up about 35%, and 4 bedroom homes make up actually 48% still. So we're still building for the market, which is quite interesting to see. And we know that we need an influx or strong investment in affordable and smaller homes for our more vulnerable citizens. I'm going to show this information to Kainga Ora. Anyway, yeah, so we really do need an increase in investment in the homes that we need rather than the ones that generate the most profit for property developers. Okay, so double-digit house price growth does continue across the region, but we are seeing easing or signs of easing across both the district and the region. So Manawatu average house prices reached $673,831 over the year to January, so up 27.1%, still very strong. And that's an increase of $143,584, so still very strong. When we look at median house prices for February, so this is the latest data, REI and Z always puts out their data a lot earlier, so we have access to more recent information there. So they have risen to $632,000, the median price, up $82,000 or 14.9% over the year. So in terms of our market signals that we're seeing, we can see that the urgency in the market is dissipating, or the impact of fear of missing out seems to be dissipating. So the number of sales continue to trend downwards, and there's an influx of stock across New Zealand and across the Manawatu-Wanganui region as well. So this is easing demand side pressure, which implies that we will see a further easing in house price growth. Now, the Reserve Bank is forecasting a 9% decline in house prices across New Zealand over the year. That will be interesting to see how that plays out in the district, because we still have that very strong population growth and very strong employment and earnings across the district. So it will be interesting to see, but definitely something we're watching. So 401 houses sold, down 5.9% from the previous year. So we are seeing a decline in sales. House sales dropped 40.1% for the Manawatu-Wanganui region versus 32.8% in February 22 versus February 21. So the median, really interestingly, median days to sell across the wider region doubled to 48 days. So that's twice what it was a year ago. New Zealand also increased by 11 days. So again, we're seeing that urgency kind of fall away from the market a little bit. In terms of the desperation to buy, the median days to sell really shows that very strongly. We're also seeing a sharp increase in the number of properties that are being listed. So again, we're having that increase in supply on the other side of the equation. The region now has 16 weeks of stock versus just six weeks of stock in February 2021. So yeah, so we're seeing sales activity down with more properties on the market, which will ease those growth or house price inflation as we move forward. So strong growth in rental prices do really persist alongside plateaued supply. So active bonds, that's our annual growth rate relative to the number of bonds. It's on the right-hand side, sorry. So we've got 1,485 properties there available on the formal rental market. Again, we do also have an informal rental market that is very difficult to measure unless it's census time, and then we can measure it. But this is a formal rental market and rents bonds that are actually submitted to MB and the tenancy services in New Zealand. So we're seeing growth there sit around 2.1%, yet we had much higher growth previous to around the 2009 period when it started to fall. Interestingly, in 2017, we saw quite a sharp decline in the rental properties available in the district, which fell to under 1,300. Now, that was around the time we saw this nationwide, where the Labour Party was campaigning on how they were going to tackle the housing market, and a lot of those suggested policies that did come to fruition, the majority of them were going to impact on the profitability of providing rental properties for the market. So we saw people disinvesting, and we saw people pulling their properties out of the rental stock. Of course, some of them were keeping them for capital gain and just leaving them empty on the basis of the increasing costs and compliance, etc. So as we've seen, median rents up really strongly in the district, up to $490, which is an increase of $60 year on year, 14%. Lower quartile rents up a very concerning $70 year on year. So further price pressure on lower quartile rents, the median and upper quartile rents. So that's an increase of 19.2%. Now paying $435 in the lower quartile for rents in the district. Upper quartile rents sitting at $555, up $70, so a 14.4% increase. So across New Zealand, to compare, median rents increased by $50 or 11.6% to $550. Lower quartile rents increased by $30 to $420. So up 8.7%, and upper quartile rents increased $40 to $680, which is up 8%. So as we can see in terms of the nominal value of our rents, we are still more affordable than the New Zealand average, but we do have much stronger price pressure in that area. The CPI for December suggested that rental prices increased by 3.8% across New Zealand. We'd be in the higher range relative to the New Zealand average. Interestingly, the cost of new builds increased 15.7% over the year to December from the latest CPI figures.
Stacey, a question here from Councillor Ford.
Sure.
Thanks, Your Worship. Stacey, just a couple of things. One is the median sale price, certainly in Fielding, and I do acknowledge that Fielding is different to Manawatu District, has been coming down a bit in the last 3 to 4 months. So whether that's a trend or because of our small number of sales, those median figures are quite volatile. But my question relates to going back to the size of houses. So when I started as a trainee valuer in the 1970s, we had a thing called the modal house, and you might as well call it the standard house, the average house, and that was 93 square meters, or in the old language, 1,000 square feet. And that was typical of what was being built in the 1970s. Over time, that has approximately doubled to something closer to 200 square meters, and I believe that we were the third largest average new house price in the world, behind Australia and I think it was America. And then nationally, my understanding is that the average floor area has come back quite a bit to more like 160 square meters. But of course, that includes a lot of the cities, and I guess that includes apartments and flats that are being built. So my question is, do we have that sort of information for Manawatu District in terms of floor areas being built?
Stats New Zealand does you can go down to TA level on floor area. I could certainly get the data from the internal data that we have. It would be a manual exercise, but we could do that. So yeah, that would be interesting analysis to look at and see what the aggregate size of those properties are and how it's changed over time. So I'll have a look at that for you, Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Stacey.
Okay. So we've had a strong growth in visitor spending over the year. Oh, sorry, it's still got October 2021. It's actually January 2021. So we've had $27 million spent in January 2021 versus 34 in January 2022. So it's an increase of 25.8%. I was really heartened to see that there was a slight increase for poor old Queenstown Lakes District, relative to what we've seen with plummeting spending there over the last couple of years. So again, coming off a low base, but good to see some slight recovery there at 1.4%. So that was very positive. Within our district, within our region, of course, Ruapehu has been impacted the most due to the tourism, strong international and domestic tourism sector down 1.4%, with Auckland, of course, down quite strongly at 3.5%. So consumption data to January reflects the confidence to spend. So retail expenditure in the district increased 12.3% over the January year versus a much softer 5.6% growth in expenditure nationally. So a lot of this growth is being generated by the fact that we do have high employment and earnings growth in the district due to our industry structure. So people are still earning money and they're confident to spend. We also had very strong increase, of course, in new cars registered and commercial vehicles in the district, which these are kind of proxies for confidence. So if people, households and businesses are going out and spending money on new cars and businesses are spending on new commercial vehicles, then it is an indication that they are feeling quite confident to go out there and invest, which is very, very positive. But there are other things that are also driving that retail expenditure growth.
Just a question there, Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thank you. Stacey, just other consumer spending, not quite like I was thinking about, oh, is that cars, but you just mentioned it before, vehicles. Oh, sorry, what would fit into that criteria?
It is actually cars.
Ah.
Yeah, it is actually cars. So we don't have a lot of cars being bought in the Manawatu, but we have people who reside in the Manawatu, cars from other areas and registering them to the district. So yeah, it is those vehicles that are included in the other consumer spending. There is a couple of other things as well, and I'm sorry, I don't recall exactly, but I'll get that information to you. But yes, cars are. And I did have to look twice at that as well when I was looking at the data and thinking, okay, we've had quite a strong reduction in cars being bought, but then but clearly it's explained by the fact that people buy their cars from outside the district.
Probably not helped by the fact that, I mean, I know, a few folk at Toyota New Zealand, they say, look, if you order a brand new hybrid REV today, you'll see it in a year. So, I mean, it's those issues, supply issues as well, that are no doubt affecting it. That's quite a drop. It's 17%.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's really interesting to look at what's happening internationally with inputs to car production, especially now with China going back into lockdowns in some of the areas, that produce a lot of the goods that go into car production. So in 2020, we saw a massive decline in purchase of new cars and commercial vehicles due to the lack of supply across the country. So it wasn't indicating that people didn't have the money to buy them. It was just simply the supply wasn't available. So that will be one we'll watch as we go forward. So retail expenditure is driven in part by rising costs, of course.
Sorry, Stacey, Councillor Hadfield had a question.
Well,
yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Just further to Councillor Casey's point there, Stacey. Because we've got such a high government presence in the district, whether it's health, defence, etc., who all buy their vehicles in bulk through whatever, probably through the government stores board or whoever the hell does it now. But I wonder if all of those vehicle, or sales actually register in any of this data as well, or whether that fits into that, as Councillor Casey suggested, sort of outside that, is purchased outside the area, as it were.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where it was purchased; it's where it's registered to. So I would assume that those vehicles would be included within these figures.
Yeah, thanks for that.
It's interesting though, because if we look at ourselves versus Palmerston North, for example, we're still quite a bit higher. So they have a large presence of government activity over there as well. So I think we're still having a large proportion of private investment as well as public in these areas. So I couldn't help but take a deep dive into our petrol prices and looking at what's happening. So this is from the MB fuel price monitoring. So this is the weekly data. So as we can see from that, premiums up 43.4% on the year, regular up 47%, and diesel up 72.2%, which I was not too happy about, having just bought a diesel ute. But anyway, so this is really impacting on those prices at the pump. Interestingly, looking at international data, the prices come right back. So we're sitting now at around the 96% for international crude, the Brent benchmark. That went up to $139 a barrel US last week during all the volatility. So we've also had relief, of course, of 25 cents per litre at the pump, which is going to really support households and businesses in terms of their expenditure. And we are likely to see volatility continue in that market. Overnight, internationally, they are projecting that Russian output of oil will drop about 30%. So that is likely to continue to create volatility and spiking prices in the market. So it is also worth noting that the government tax on that ranges from about 26% for diesel, up to about 55% for regular. So that's quite a big chunk. So that 25 cents relief will be very, very much valued. It's also interesting to look at the data around the import margins, which have absolutely plummeted to around just over 20% from about 42% over the last 3 weeks. And that's really showing that the importers of the product of gas are taking a hit and doing their bit to keep these prices down. So I was quite interested to see that data flow through. So these domestic and global pressures have driven inflation to 32-year highs. Over the year to January, fruit and veggies up 15.4%, milk, cheese and egg prices up 6.6%. So this is domestic data, CPI or food index data. Prices for meat, poultry and fish up 5.7%. So that's the increase in costs for our households in terms of actually buying healthy food that will keep them healthy. Cost of new builds increased 15.7%. So we're seeing that really flow through. And builders are actually passing on those costs now. So they're not holding on to them as they have done previously. They're passing them right through to the market. Construction input costs up 7.6%. Labour costs increased 2.6% in 2021, with public sector up 2.3% and private sector up 2.8%. So we can expect that labour costs to increase over time because people are offering more money to retain good staff. So we're likely to see that spike. Comments made by Peter Crawford last week about he's not confident in the Reserve Bank forecasting around the increase of labour costs. I would agree with him wholeheartedly that we're going to see higher than what the Reserve Bank is forecasting. So we're likely to see inflation because it's like a vicious cycle that flows through to our inflationary pressure. And when labour costs become embedded or high labour cost increases become embedded, then we can say we have embedded inflation, and we're really seeing signs of that now. So we've got inflation now forecast to hit 7.4% by June. So mortgage borrowing has declined sharply, as we can see. This is Reserve Bank New Zealand data for the whole country. So we've seen a steady decline of over 20% for first-time buyers. And this is in January 22 versus January 2021. So other owner occupiers down over 17%, investors down 50.8%, really strong. And mortgage investment for business purposes also down strongly at close to 25%. So we know the different legislation that's come in over the last year. So the LVR for investors increased 40% in April. So that drove down demand from the investment sector. Interest rates rising, forecast to hit 3.4% by 2024. The Reserve Bank is getting a lot of pressure to raise them faster from the commercial banks and from Infometrics. Interestingly, I would say it's an interesting time because of the inflation that we're experiencing in New Zealand is not generated domestically. So reducing demand for international goods such as oil is not going to impact on their prices. That's not going to push down the prices. We're a drop in the ocean compared to, we can't make a difference. We're price takers. So the Reserve Bank's going to have to be very, very careful not to increase pressure on New Zealand families and households by driving up interest rates to levels that are actually not going to impact on inflation anyway. So the Credit Contracts and Consumer Finance Act as well is definitely having an impact on this. And if you can see this chart, it's really since December that these figures have really plummeted further. So I know the government is saying that it isn't having an impact, but as we can see from that data, it certainly implies with the sharp decline that it very much is.
Stacey, if I could butt in, we're certainly seeing that from an accountancy firm point of view. Dealing with banks at the moment is way more difficult than it was a few months ago, and getting a loan is difficult for anyone, residential or business lenders.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing that. And the government has announced that they will be removing some of those, so removing the need to check current spending from recent transactions. So they will be removing that. So, and not requiring a full income and expense assessment when it's obvious that a client can actually afford to pay back the lending. So they are looking to tweak it. They are also doing a broader review, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see if the measures they're brought in or bringing in shortly will actually impact on those figures.
Councillor Casey, did you have a question? No? Oh, your hand's up from previous. Thank you.
Right,
Councillor Ford.
Oh, sorry, I'll go back.
Thanks. Just to back up what Councillor Campbell said about the borrowing, I've just been through it myself, as my son, trying to buy a first home. Absolutely harrowing, just over the top interrogation to a ridiculous level, really unpleasant experience. But my question is, down the bottom of the graph there, I'm sorry, I can't work out, what does LHS and RHS mean, please?
My apologies. Left-hand side, left-hand side, left-hand side, right-hand side. The reason I've put the business purposes on the other because it's a lot lower level of spending. So I needed, otherwise you couldn't even see it at all. So yeah, my apologies. Should have explained that.
Sorry, I still don't understand what it's.
So the axis on the left-hand side is the one to refer to for first-time investors. Yeah, and the right hand is business purposes.
Thanks, Stacey.
Okay, so business lending does recover a little bit while agriculture lending softens. So this is the latest data as well for business sector lending. So business lending was up 6.1 in January 2022 versus January 2021. So up to $123.8 billion. Agricultural lending has really plateaued and fallen away actually over the last couple of years. As we can see, there's been a bit of a drop off there. So down 1.1% in January 22 versus January 2021. So it's interesting when a sector is doing so well that there would be that outcome. But you know, I mean, if farmers may also not be wanting to lend at this time, I'm not sure, or I don't know whether the current restrictions or monetary conditions are preventing the agriculture sector from accessing financing. So I'd be interested to know if anybody else has any anecdotal observation around that for our district, whether or not that is impacting on our farmers. Sorry, okay. So I did put this one in here as well around personal consumer lending because we did see quite a drop off or a deleveraging of consumer debt after the first lockdown in 2020. So personal consumer spending declined by 18.9% since December 2019. And lending liabilities fell from 2.7 billion down 15.7% over the same period. So this partially, I think, will be being impacted by those tighter monetary conditions, but also people being quite risk averse over that period and choosing to try and get rid of that consumer debt. So that's quite interesting outcome as well. So New Zealand is both benefiting from the booming commodity prices, but we're also paying the cost as well. So we know that commodity prices for our largest agri-food producers are at record highs. Forestry products have had some strength over the last year relative to the year previously, and they are expected to recover more so over 2022. So we'll be watching that market quite closely because it does also have a reasonable presence here within the Manawatu district. But on the other side of the equation, of course, we've got Brent crude up 47.9. I think when I presented to the joint strategic last week, it was up about 98. So we can see that that has fallen off quite substantially since that period of time. But we're seeing coal up almost 300%, wheat up over 75%, oats 77%, corn 35%, things like nickel up 199%, magnesium 153, lithium. So all these pressures on global supply chains are going to impact in particular on production of cars, semiconductor chips, tablets, headphones, electric cars, and a whole lot of other products, iPhones, cars and electronics. So it is, as well as increasing on-farm costs and the food production globally. So there's quite concern at the moment globally around food and energy security. The demand for coal has also increased very, very strongly globally, with China now looking to increase their production by 30% because they recognise how important it is to ensure that you have secure energy supplies as well as food supplies. So the rhetoric across the world is changing very much to ensuring both energy and food supply for populations. Interesting changes afoot. So what this means for our wider economic conditions. So international factors are likely to continue to constrain global supply chains. We will see continued increases in the cost of imported goods, and food production costs will continue to rise. RBNZ will raise interest rates. At the moment, they're forecasting 3.4% to 2024. The big question for our households and our businesses is whether or not they will raise them even faster than that in an attempt to control inflation. Domestic inflation, it might be relatively effective. It's just the concern around that those high level of important inflation that we're seeing. So those rising interest rates will also contribute to rising costs and impact on the ability of our families and businesses to buy the goods they need in a time where costs are rising rapidly across the economy. So our food producers will benefit considerably from those booming commodity prices, but there will be an impact on our low to middle income households and businesses and more vulnerable households. Got to end on a positive note, because there's lots of positives, because our economy is actually we're so much more resilient than most other places. And we've really demonstrated this over the last 18 months. We've really demonstrated the strength and resilience of the local economy, largely because of our industry structure. And we're seeing that with population moving here to the district for those employment and lifestyle opportunities. So our key sectors actually continue to be resilient, and even possibly more resilient than what they have been over the last 18 months. So that is very positive for the economic performance of our district, and ensuring that our households have opportunities for employment and to earn money to cover the increase in costs that they're being faced with. We should see some easing in domestic supply chains over 2022. However, over the last few days, China's decided to lock down about 37 million of their population, and some of those inputs to production that we require for our supply chains will be affected by that. So one of the largest, Shenzhen. So that's one of the largest producing areas of China. So they large amount of factories there that produce about 30% of the world's inputs to production. So that will be affected. Supply chains will be affected by those further lockdowns. So easing border restrictions will support tourism and hopefully ease labour supply pressures. We know that they've brought forward those dates by about 3 months, but we still have no dates on international tourists being able to come into the country from visa required countries. So ones that are allowed and without a visa are able to come back on the 2nd of May with, I think it's the 13th of April for Australian visitors. So that's very positive for our tourism industry. So substantial and expanding public sector activity across the district and across neighbouring Palmerston North will really support economic activity in the region, because those incomes are protected and they're not vulnerable to any changes in supply and demand or general economic conditions. If anything, they increase at a time when there is pressure on the economy. So record levels of public and private investment, record commodity prices, increased competitiveness of our food producers and sustained global demand for goods produced in the region will also continue to support economic activity in the district. Any questions?
Thanks, Stacey. Very comprehensive as always. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. I think you summarised it up quite well at the end. I did notice this morning article on stuff from ANZ economist Sharon Zollner, rather pessimistic, but I suspect that there's quite a difference between her urban view and our rural agribusiness-based view. I can see our economy going pretty strong for some time yet. Given that the market prices for egg products are at record highs. So it should see us pretty right for a year or two, do you think?
Look, we're going to see those disparate impacts on different parts of our communities. We're going to see our food producers doing very well. If the forecasts play out to be true, they're going to do extremely well. We're going to see continued employment in those areas, and that's going to support spending across the wider economy. So we are in a much better position than our urban neighbours for that reason, which are more reliant on service sector activity. So that is a real bonus for us, but we're also going to see pain in some areas of our community. People on fixed incomes, people who can't adjust their incomes to cover the cost of rising everything, really. So we're going to see different outcomes for different parts of our community, but I do agree that the rural parts of New Zealand are in a far stronger position than the municipalities across the country and economically.
Yeah, that's right. And but I think you're right about the pain. There are elements of pain locally. I also read this morning on stuff that we've got 2 local cafes due to close, one in Rongotia and one in Fielding, unfortunately. So they're obviously victims of the pandemic, which is rather a shame, but that's what it is.
Yes, yeah, sad to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so no further questions. Councillor Ford.
Oh, sorry, I may have touched the button at the wrong time, but if you're ready, I'll move that the council receive the Manawatu District Quarterly Economic Update to December 2021.
Thank you, and I'm happy to second that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Stacey. It must be a really interesting time as working in the economy with, it's so volatile at the moment. And so I can imagine that would really hold your interest. But thank you again for a very comprehensive report.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, right. We have the Manawatu Community Trust team with us, so we will carry on with their reports. So we're going to page 43, and this is the Community Trust 6 monthly report to the end of December. And Lynn or Michael, was there anything that you wanted to highlight in this before I hand it over to the trust team?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to hand over to Michael.
No, this is just straight to Tyson. He's got a good story to tell.
Excellent.
I'm quite happy to hand off to someone else to continue it if that's the way to do it.
So welcome, Tyson, and I see Kevin's on board as well. So thank you very much. Great to receive your report. I'll hand it over to you and then we'll open it up for questions. And also Alison, sorry.
Morning, yes, we've got Kevin and Alison here. We've got the 6 monthly report, so that's from the 1st of July to 31st of December. And we've also got our current SOI in front of you there. So the current SOI is the report for the 6 months to date, but we've also got the future SOI as well. So we've also got comments on that one. So we'll deal with the 6 monthly report first. I think there's some overall comments to make. This year's hardly been business as usual with lockdowns, building sector disturbances and floodings in our flats and of course in our district as well overall. So whilst the reports kind of look a bit as though it is business as usual, we've actually had to manage a fair bit through all of this. So there's a background there. We've also got the Cleveland development getting along, and despite all of that context, I'd have to say a big thumbs up to Polspec, who are pretty much keeping that on track. So we're still aiming for a May opening around there. And also Liam Greer, one of our trustees, who's been leading the charge from the trust perspective around there. So despite all of that hard context, we've actually been progressing that pretty well. The Court one has been delayed though. So just putting the building consent together, getting access to all the reports and all the different bits of advice has taken us longer than we expected, but we intend to be submitting that in the next month, the architect tells us. So if we get into the actual 6 month report itself, we've got a couple of pages of dollar points there, the profit and loss on the balance sheet. But for the 6 months, the short story is revenue has held up pretty well, pretty marginal differences, but revenue, the expenses are down, and that's for 3 main reasons. We've had lower costs. We thought we'd spend more on raising funds, basically building our PR up and getting some legal and consulting costs to try and put together some fundraising. We haven't had to incur those yet. We will start to incur those probably next year, next financial year. Horizons were really good to us and offered us a rates rebate, just like Manawatu District Council does. So actually our Horizons rates are lower than we expected. Now if Alison turns on her unmutes herself, that'll be because I've got something wrong here, but it's going well, so I must be telling the truth. In Healthy Homes costs, the first 6 months, it was going a little bit slower. So getting a hold of the heat pumps we need to put in, getting a hold of the extractor fans, we were a little bit slower than we initially expected, but that has picked up from now on. So the first 6 months, the spend is a little bit lower than we actually expected. We've actually gone a little bit ahead of our program on that since then, so we've pretty much caught up. On the non-financial, so that's from, if I get the right page going here, from page 54 onwards. Here we go, 58 onwards. You'll see we're down on the refurbishments, primarily because of the lockdowns, but also we have found it hard to find the right people to do the work on our Rafferty flats and get those finished. And then we had a whole block down Queen Street, which got flooded out, so we had to do work on those rather than actually keep on refurbishments. We hope to get a couple more refurbishments done. We'll probably aim for 6 versus the 8. So we won't be too far off, but we've just had to focus on other things. Of course, all the Healthy Homes compliance, we've had to put effort into that as well, at the same time as trying to hit that 8 refurbishments. We've got the maintenance one there. This is the one that audit gives us a lot of pain about, because it basically wants us to be able to verify that the contractors have done the work at exactly the right time, whereas we actually measure it from when we receive the request and from when we follow up with the contractors to make sure it's done. We also only focus on urgent maintenance requests. So to give you a bit of context here, in the 6 months that we're dealing with in this report, we received 335 maintenance requests. Only 3 of those were actually classified as urgent, and they were plumbing leaks, effectively. 2 of those plumbing leaks, one was the flooding in the Shelton, so on the 13th of December. Those 2 plumbing leaks, the first one was dealt with in 1.5 hours, so we logged the call and then we got our plumber onto it and they fixed it with 1.5 hours. The second one, we logged the call and the plumber had fixed it within 2.5 hours. So we're pretty confident we are responding to that really well. We are still debating with Audit New Zealand exactly how to frame that measure, and we'll pick that up in the SOI points as well. I think that's the main ones there. Do we want to deal with the 6-month report, or should I just keep on going on to the SOI as well?
We'll just deal with this one first because they have separate recommendations. Thank you for that. You answered many of the points queries that I had around that. The Queen Street flats, are the residents back in their flood damaged flats now?
Yes, they're back in their cleaned out flats.
Great, excellent. And I understand that Rotary came on board with some volunteers to help clean that out too. So it was great community effort there. Open it up. Sorry, Tyson.
I was just going to say, that it was also nice that a number of our tenants were able to go to family at that point, but we did have to put a couple into motels. So our team responded really well to actually organising all of that.
Okay, right. Let's open it for questions or comments from the team. None? Excellent report, excellent report. So that can take us to the recommendation on page 43. If I have a mover and a seconder, please.
Yes, Your Worship. That the
Manawatu,
that the Manawatu Community Trust half-yearly report to the 31st of December 2021 be received.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ford. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Excellent. That motion is carried. Well done, team. It's challenging times and I love the positive attitude that goes with it. So well done. Yes, so let's move next to 11.4 on page 63. This is your draft statement of intent. First to Michael, is there anything there from a council point of view you wish to highlight?
From a council point of view, I've had a conversation with Tyson just in terms of making sure that the final will comply with all legislative requirements in terms of making sure that the accounting policies and financial statements are all in place, and that will be done for the final. So over to you, Tyson.
Thank you, Michael. We tried to save everyone 3 pages of boring accounting policy statements, but Michael said we have to do it for the legislation. So sorry about that. We'll have to put them back in there. We've also, you'll see we've had a bit of a play with some of the measures. We're just trying to make them more relevant to what we actually do. Since 2008, things have changed. We've done a great stabilisation effort, but we are trying to push more on the asset maintenance. So we're really trying to make these measures explain what we do. So we've got the renovation flats there. We're shifting it more to a star rating. So we've actually done a lot of work on our assets, and we understand a bit more. We've created a 5-star rating to say which ones are the best, which ones are the worst, and we want to focus our refurbishments on the ones which are the worst and try and bring them up to a good level. Now, this is really about bang for buck. We don't want to be spending money on the best ones, and it's also about, it's not painting the insides of it, it may actually be a roof that's going on. So when we say refurbishment, a lot of people think that's about doing the carpet and doing the kitchen. Yes, that's there as well, but actually re-roofing a whole block can actually lift the maintenance and the star rating for a whole lot of the areas. So this is actually us getting smarter about where we spend our money and what we put our effort into. We've mentioned the maintenance request, and we're continuing to debate that with audit, so we probably see a bit of a change in that one for the end of the year, but we'll bring that back to you as part of the final one. On page 68, we've also got goal 3 there. All right, I'm just flicking through on a different computer. So goal 3, we've started to state what our rental policy is. So we think this is important so that people are clear on what we mean by affordability. We've never really had this before. It's been our internal policy. We would like to start stating this and tracking it externally as well. So we've got it as, has to be below 30% of income for our tenants. We're currently tracking at around 25, 26% of that, so we were well under. That may increase over time as we have to pay for more government compliance. Again, a little bit more arcane, so under that, we also have changed a couple of the suggested changes to the financial performance targets. So before, they were a bit broad. We actually want to tie them to, first of all, our banking covenants with ANZ. So if we don't meet those, then we're in real trouble. We might as well say what those are, and that's the 50% equity to total asset base. So we're open with that, and we're going to report where we are. We're well above it right now. That's pretty good. We also wanted to give a measure about basically how stressed our balance sheet is. So how much debt can we afford? So the measure there, maintain an interest coverage ratio of EBITDA to interest rate above 3. If we're below 3, we're probably too stressed. We can't afford our debt. Right now, we're well above it. We could afford more debt. Our problem is more people lend to us. The banks aren't too keen to. They're very good at supporting us at our current levels and will give us at that. But we need to find other people to lend to us as well, because we can certainly afford it based on that measure. We've also given you some of the numbers from page 69 there. This doesn't quite match the profit and loss and the balance sheet formulation that you get as part of the annual report. This is because we've tried to simplify it down and give you a one-page picture over the 3 years. So it's not just the revenue and expenses, we're also trying to tell you what we're intending to spend in terms of capital and debt repayment. So hopefully it gives you a good thing to track us on both the revenue as well as the capital expenditure. So you can start to see at the bottom there, planned capital, we've got the refurbishments and major maintenance, what our new development spend will be and what our homes compliance will be. And then under that, we've also letting you know what our new borrowing and debt repayment will be over those 3 years. So it's not your classic balance sheet P&L, but hopefully this works for you in terms of giving you a snapshot that can be tracked against. That's all from me.
Excellent. Thank you. Alison or Kevin, is there anything you wanted to add? You're on mute if you wish to speak.
Yes, I don't really wish to speak. I think Tyson has summed the situation up exceedingly well, as usual.
Excellent. That's great. The one question I had around the SOI, with all of these targets, particularly in the financial performance, does that include the health centre?
Yes, it does. Yes, it includes all of our operations.
Okay, thank you. And the other one was, given that the promotion of health services is part of the objectives, there's nothing in that SOI relating directly to that apart from financials? Oh, no, I beg your pardon, develop goal 3. Yes, it does. Although it doesn't mention the actual around the health centre services. It was more a question given the times that we're in and with COVID, etc. And I know previously we've discussed the challenges that the health centre had maintaining the expenses for providing the service to our community because of COVID and people not able to go in. So are you able to comment on where that is? You know, are they holding their own and you're happy with what's going on?
From a landlord perspective, we're very happy. We gave them rent relief during the COVID times, but that's bounced back, so it's back to full rental there, and they seem to be happy at that level. So we're always open to, if they do, go through financial tough times such as the COVID, we are willing as a landlord to accommodate some of that. I suppose for us, I mean, the excellent effort that went into building the health centre, and that was able to leverage funding that other parties wouldn't have been able to receive. But right now, it's probably more on a commercial footing for us. So we certainly don't give them 30% of income affordable rents. It is much more at a commercial level than that.
Yeah, excellent. I think it's, I think it's really good to remind ourselves that the health centre is something that the trust took on and have done an outstanding job for our community. And in some cases almost too successful. So we just need to remind ourselves and the community the work that's gone into there, and thank you for that. Are there any questions or comments from our team?
If I could just, as Kevin here again, if I could perhaps just make one comment, in that health also has the well-being aspect associated with it, and we're working in association with Manchester House to do a study of where we can go with the senior hub that Manchester House is developing, and we're very thankful for the council and helping us to fund a study into the future of well-being for seniors in 10-15 years time, so that we can look towards supporting the senior hub and the services that might be delivering to the future elderly.
Excellent. That's great. Great initiative and great partnership with other groups in our community. Thank you. So if there are no questions or comments, we do have a recommendation on page 63. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Short.
Community Trust draft statement of intent 2022-2025 subject to feedback being incorporated into the final statement of intent.
Thank you. So that was moved by Councillor Short, seconded by Councillor Marsh. Any further questions, comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Thank you. Motion carried. And thank you for, again, for the great work that you do. Really good report. And yes, it's great to keep tweaking our contracts, statements of intent, etc., so that they do stay relevant and clearly reflect what you're doing and the goals that you have. So outstanding work again. So thank you, Tyson, to you and to all of your team. If you could please pass that on. Thank you for joining us today. So take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Yeah, just before, is Tyson gone?
Yeah. Don't think I have quite yet.
No, there he is. And it was very remiss of me, and I've just been reminded. Kevin, I understand that you are retiring shortly, and I've seen the vacancy notice go there. So we just want to wish you well, but first of all, thank you for the work that you have done and bringing the trust operationally to where it is today. And we wish you all the best for your retirement.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that comment.
Excellent. Thank you. So on that note, team, we will adjourn to have a 10-minute break and see you back at 22:11. Thank you.
Are we back online?
Yep.
I think your worship is mute.
Yeah, well, I've just spent an interesting 10 minutes talking to the kids at Lytton Street School over the fence about vegetable gardener. There you go.
So welcome back. We are in 11.5 Open Spaces Contract Section 17A review. So we have the paper in front of us. Carl, I understand you're going to take us through this report, so welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Your Worship and councillors. Yeah, the purpose of this report is just to present the 17A review, which has been undertaken for the Open Spaces and Cemeteries Maintenance Contract. You'll be receiving a number of these in the next few months from a number of other business units. But this is the first one we've done now. So the purpose of the 17A is to develop or ensure that we're getting the best value for money and the required service for the ratepayers being received. The 17A review looks at the 4 delivery model or potential delivery models that are available. We've used Jeff Canham Consulting, who is a parks industry specialist, to carry out this on behalf of council, just to give us a subjective view on the open spaces contract that we have with recreational services. The 4 delivery models that they had was reviewed were in-house delivery, council controlled with local authority, council controlled with several other local authorities, been a shared service, either with like Palmy North or Rangatiki or something like that, or another partner, our personal agency, which we currently run through recreational services. A 17A review is required as part of the Local Government Act. It has to be done within every 6 years or within 2 years of a contract renewal. As our contract is terminating or renewal up for recreational services on the 30th of June 2023, it's timely that we're getting this done. The main results from the review that Jeff Canham Consulting provided us was that they were pretty happy with the whole contract that we've done. There's been significant improvements across the district as well from a level of service from the 2015 results. So there's a lot of positives come through that. Compliance has been a big improvement for us. Prior to recreational services coming on board, we had one playground that was, now they're all compliant, which is a major undertaking. There's been a significant improvement in our asset management systems as well, which recreational services have helped us to carry out. There's not too much else that I want to raise with you guys, but I just want to point out that we've had recreational services on board for 6 years and 2 weeks. They've had one anniversary because they started on the 29th of February, sorry. So they've had one anniversary, which they made quite a big deal about a couple of years ago. So yeah, one other thing that I'd like to point out, that recreational services, they've had a contract extension approved through council each year. So there's been many positives with the relationship that we have with the contractor at all levels as well, through their senior management, through to the guys on the ground. So yeah, I'd just like to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Carl. This question may not be completely related to this, but I recall in the past we've had rec services come to council and give us a report on what they're doing, and opportunity. It's more an opportunity for us to build on that relationship and talk to them. Is that still the intention?
We will bring them up once we start negotiating with them. The times that they came up for the presentations were for the contract renewal or extension period generally. But if I'm more than happy to get them down here and have a presentation with council if they like. If we do go with the extension with recreational services, one of the things that I'll be pushing is if you have a contractor in the same role for too long, then there is a tendency that could get stale. I'm going to be pushing them quite heavily for a proposal on how they expect to mitigate that, and what sort of refresh we can do as part of this contract. But yeah, happy to bring them down and present council.
Thank you. No, I don't want to create any extra work, and it sounds like if we reconnect their contract, they would be doing that anyway.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, but you know, from a customer services point of view, you know, I find them outstanding. As well as doing their jobs with whatever it is, they're always pleasant, bright and friendly, happy to chat, talk to you about the plants they're planting, etc. So, so it's good to see this report coming back recommending to continue that contract with them. Thanks, Carl. Let's open it for questions, comments, please. Councillor Belsky.
Yeah, thank you, Carl, for that. My concern in these spaces or cemeteries is rabbits. I had Don Beard ring me up, extremely upset that the rabbits in Kimbolton Cemetery were doing quite a lot of damage. And when I got hold of James or you, I'm not sure, they wouldn't allow anyone to shoot them. And there's still rabbits all around that cemetery today. And they are a problem, of course, in open spaces and reserves, but is it surely the Kimbolton, or there must be someone that's you know, a licensed operator and very well respected. Even Mark Dickens shot a deer down Kirakira Road that got out of venison packers. So I'm just wondering, is your policy strict on no shooting of rabbits around cemeteries, Carl?
Steve, yeah, we do have a contractor that is controlling them within cemeteries, within the Fielding Cemetery and another number of others around the place. It's quite difficult to get a contractor, and there's with the headstones and stuff, it can be an issue, but we can talk about this offline if you want, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Yeah.
Thank you. So although pest control would sit with the regional council, wouldn't it?
Correct. Yeah, we do deal with our own stuff on our own property. But yeah, if there's a major problem, we can work with Horizons on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Quarry.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Any reaction I've had in regard to the work that Rec Services has done has been positive, and it's not very often that council contractors have nothing but people using council contractors have nothing but positive reactions to them. So you know, it was one of the best decisions council made was to employ Rec Services, and yeah, it's continued to be so. So well done.
Glad to hear that. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? I do like the point, Carl, that you talked about, you know, the risk of getting stale and how do you refresh the contract. So it's good to hear that discussion is happening.
Yeah.
So if there's no further questions or comments, we do have a recommendation on page 70. Councillor Marsh.
You're quite happy to move that through the chair, that the council accept the findings within the new completed, the review completed by Jeff Canyon Consulting, and allow officers to negotiate directly with Rec Services for an extension of the contract C4-1519 open space maintenance.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Casey. Thank you.
And just to point to that, if I can speak to that too, I certainly uphold the comments that have been made around Rec Services and their performance to date. I think it's been absolutely fantastic. I would see a real issue if, Carl, if you did go back out to the open market as to how we bring a new service provider in of the quality of Rec Services, and now the intellect that they have around our whole district and all the jobs that have been added to that contract at minimal cost extra to us. And the things that they're doing for us, I think it's a huge tick from me.
Yeah, that's right. We could go the open tender process, but essentially, I'd say Rec Services win the contract again.
Great, thank you. So we have that moved and seconded. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you. So yes, you've heard nothing but positive comments. So well done, Carl, and your team.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to the Rec Services and their senior managers.
Yes, definitely, definitely. And we look forward to hearing from them direct once the contract's been renewed. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Your Worship, can I please also add a comment? I'd just like to acknowledge Carl and the way he's managing that contract. He's got a very good professional relationship with Rec Services, which is doing well in that space.
Excellent. And I think, yeah, it does. It reflects on the relationship from both council and Rec Services. So well done to everybody involved. So the next one is 11.6. We're on page 88, Proposed District Planning and Food Act fees and charges. So Lynn, is there anything in this one that, or Ali, that you wish to highlight?
Your Worship, the only thing that I wish to highlight is that Carol did review the fees before she went on leave, and worked with Amanda to ensure that they reflected inflationary adjustments, and that if the council does accept the recommendation, we would put this out tomorrow and have a month that would allow people to make a submission.
Thank you. So two questions from me. So we set those charges. They're not set by legislation or nationally. We set them, okay. And the other question was the figures we've got in our report, unless I've missed something, don't show us where any increases may have been. We can't see what the previous year's fees were, unless I've missed something.
Apologies, you're correct. Paul, are you able to, off the top of your head, say what last year's fees were? Sorry, we should have had that in the report. It's a minimal change, I'm aware of that, but I can't tell you exactly what the change was.
No, I can't give you all of the fees and charges from last year. I did look at them a couple of days ago, and I noticed that it was around about sort of $50 to $80 on a lot of the charges that were an increase. But there's quite a number of those charges have changed throughout, so I wouldn't be able to sort of rattle those off at the top of my head, but I can certainly look those up and come back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and the point is we're not actually approving the figures, we're putting it out for consultation. It was just more in the report. It would be good to have seen the previous figures. And yep, and we can do that when it comes back to council following the consultation. Councillor Hadfield.
Thank you, Bishop. Just noting on page 92, the charges have been adjusted by inflation and rounded up to the nearest dollar. I'd be keen to know what inflationary figures and what percentage we've used on that.
Noted at the next report, when we come back, we will show what the differences in price are and what the inflationary adjustment was.
I can answer that.
Amanda's on the line. Yeah, thanks, Amanda.
So the inflationary adjuster that we use is the Burrell indicators, which we use all through the LTP and our annual plan. So in the environmental health one, I'm pretty sure it's 2.4% inflationary adjuster. So they range between 2.1 to 3.1 across our Burrell indices. Might be a little bit higher. They're the ones that were outlined in the LTP. And they are adjusted each year, but it's a pretty good gauge if you look at the LTP Burrell indices. And so each of the areas, depending on, so there are fees and roading, that's linked to the roading indices. The environmental health is linked to the environmental health ones. I'm actually not quite sure which one they are now, but I can look that up. But they're based off our Burrell assumptions.
Thank you. Councillor Short. Thank you. Councillor Short's question is, will the consultation document that goes out to the public include the current charges so they can see where the changes are?
Yeah, we can make sure we do that.
Excellent. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Campbell.
Just a question on just to confirm the timing. These new charges take effect from 1 July, I presume. Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just a little concerned about the food service charges in terms of timing, given that, as we mentioned earlier, we've got a couple of cafes under. Well, actually, I can tell you all the cafes in town, of which we have quite a few, and quite a bit of pressure at the moment financially from COVID effects, and possibly delaying the increase by a couple of months would be useful.
That's a really good point.
Thank you. I would encourage Councillor Campbell, through your connections with them, you know, that's something that we would urge them to put into their feedback as part of the consultation. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, there is two recommendations on page 88. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ford.
I move that the council adopt the statement of proposal on the review of district planning service charges for 2022 to 2023 for public consultation in accordance with section 36 of the Resource Management Act 1991, and 2, that the council adopt the statement of proposal on the review of the Food Act fees and charges for 2022-23 for public consultation under section 205 of the Food Act 2014.
Thank you. I have a mover. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Belsky. Thank you. I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Against? Those motions are carried. Thank you. Thank you for the explanation, Lynn and your team. Right, moving to 11.7, we're on page 99. This is receiving of our Youth Council and Community Committee minutes. As usual, I don't intend to go through each one in detail other than to ask the liaison councillor for each one to bring to our attention anything they wish to highlight. So the first one is the Youth Council. Councillor G. Taylor.
Youth Council's main highlights coming up is that we've just got the leadership weekend coming up at the start of April. So that's probably our biggest thing. Otherwise, we're sort of just, I keep saying it every time, treading a little bit of treading water with the COVID situation at the moment.
Thank you.
We are probably need to put it out there to the councillors that we are possibly a little bit financially struggling at the moment, having outlaid a lot of income, a lot of money to purchase the paint for our colour run, which was, I think it's something like $4,500, and we haven't obviously been able to recuperate any of those costs, having not been able to run it. So probably just an FYI that the Youth Council are financially struggling at the moment. Obviously, we're not having the pizza cost that we would usually have every month because we're not meeting in person, but even so, yeah, any other avenues of funding that we could probably explore, we would welcome.
Thank you. Can I suggest that you have a conversation with Lynn and her team, and then we, once we
are sorted for now. We've had some conversations, but I just thought I'd put it out there and let everyone know that we are wanting to be able to get some of those costs back as soon as we can.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Moving to Tangi Moana, Councillor Short.
Thank you. Just wanted to highlight that you'll see in the minutes there that there was a public meeting held in Tangi Moana where Associate Professor, I think he is, Bruce Levovic, came and spoke to the community about the research project that our council nominated Tangi Moana for. It's quite hard doing research in the community under COVID conditions. The principal of the school also attended the meeting, and it was agreed that actually if Massey could have access to the school, that was probably a really good way of connecting with the community and also gaining young people's perspective of what their future will look like if climate change isn't addressed in their community.
Thank you for that one. So moving to Halcombe, Councillor Campbell, although I see you were an apology. So Councillor Casey, is there anything there you want to highlight?
So I could, ask Councillors Casey and Short may wish to comment on the main business of that meeting was to do with the Ministry of Education's changes to the bus route, the school bus routes, which is, in my opinion, a bit of a mess. Councillor Casey might want to comment on that.
Yep, happy to speak into that from the chairperson of the Board of Trustees for Halcombe School as well. Yes, there was a major change to bus contracts. They were due up for renewal after 15 years. With that has been a significant fee increase for bus services. It's currently negotiating with Fielding High School in regards to tweaking some times that the buses are more can be flexible on. But basically, this is a mess that our Ministry of Education have handed to us, and it's up to us to rectify. It will more than likely potentially be that Halcombe School changes its school time in order to create that flexibility for the high school. So there are some trade-offs. So yeah, I briefed the community committee on that, and it was good to get a letter of support from them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, if I could just follow up with that, it was raised at community development and on behalf of, and it was suggested that maybe council might have a role to go into bat. I did send an email out to every school in our district and asked them for comment. I got very few back, but it very much appears that it is a Halcombe School issue. Even the high school said they were quite happy with what was going on with bus routes, etc. And there were schools in Fielding that felt quite strongly that the council shouldn't get involved in this. And in particular, it appears that it is a Halcombe issue. So it's good to see, Councillor Casey, that the school is picking that up. And if you can work out something with the high school, that would be great.
I was unaware that you had gone out to other schools, Your Worship, and you've just let up some information there that I probably should have known a while ago. So we haven't had any direct feedback, but more support to Halcombe. So that's some very interesting comments this morning.
Thank you. That was an action put on the community development minutes from our last meeting for me to follow that one up. Moving to Huanui, Councillor Humphrey was there online. I also attended that meeting. It was good to meet the new principal of the school, so who's come in and really fired up, which is great. And of particular note is if you haven't seen it already, is the new signage, the Ashurst End, the new signage that's gone up. There's still some discussion about the other one, but this is for the village of Huanui. It's got a very rural flavour to it. And in fact, I have got some photos on my phone, which we should put through and get out on our social media. The team, it's been a long time coming, but they've done a great job.
If I could just add to that too, Your Worship, we had another meeting on Tuesday. And if Carl, if you're still on, there will be a request probably come through June, July, just for some extra native plants that have died and their plantings that they did out there. So that'll probably come from Richard Branson. The other thing, yeah, they're just cruising pretty much at the moment, but still keen to get on with their new strategic plan in July, and obviously have a public meeting also in September with Meet the Candidates. So
excellent. Thank you. Councillor Quarry, Sampson.
Yeah, thank you. No, things are ticking along there quite well. They do have a bit of an issue. They would like to be able to use the sign on the blow carts domain where the blow carts are. There's a large sign that advertises Manfield Park, and they were wondering if they could use part of that signboard to show the activities that are coming up in Sanson. They sort of haven't got a response to that so far. Perhaps I should talk to Lynn separately.
That is not a council sign, nor is it a Manfield sign. It needs a resource consent. It's part of the... Oh, Manfield do own the sign, sorry, I beg your pardon. So it does need a consent.
Because of its size and
Yeah.
state highway.
Yeah, state highway, the size of the sign, etc. So have a chat to Manfield.
Talk to Manfield. Okay. So council's got nothing to do with it?
No, we just
consented it.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Quarry, while we're there, no. Combolton.
Yeah, they're ticking along. They seem quite happy. Nothing much to report there.
Excellent. If there's any comment from any of the rest of the team, please jump in as we go through these. Rongatia, Councillor Short.
Thank you. Just following on from that meeting, we had the discussion about the footpaths in Oud Street. Rongatia didn't have a meeting this month due to there being a little bit of COVID in the community, but talking to Lance, their chairman, they're really thrilled to hear that the decision that the roading team have made to relook at the design of the footpaths in Oud Street. So they were very thankful for that.
Great, thank you. Moving to
Your Worship,
Councillor Campbell.
I came through Rongatia yesterday. Noticed the new signage in the middle of the roundabout in the square. Quite pleased to see those that we talked about them for some time. I think it looks pretty good.
It does, yes, it does, and they're pretty proud of it. So, Councillor Campbell, Humatangi Beach.
Oh, no great issues there. Just concerns about some flooding and stormwater, but they'll be dealt with in due course. A difficult village to control the stormwater.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the minutes that we have received, although I know our other community committees have been meeting, so we'll get those minutes in due course. So that takes us to a recommendation on page 99. And I'm happy to move that the council receives the minutes of the community committees and the Manawatu Youth Council meetings. Have a seconder for that, please, Councillor Ford. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Right, so we move to item 12. This is consideration of our late item. And as we approved before, the late item today is in relation to the draft submission seeking council support to support a letter to the Bioplant Manawatu NZ Limited air discharge resource consent process. And so that draft, I understand it has been put up into Teams, it has been put up into the open session, the draft of that letter. So we can open that up for discussion. Probably I'll start with, you know, I'm not a scientist on this, and I'm very open-minded about this whole project. I did listen into both of the public sessions that were held recently to listen to the pros and cons of the concern that's out there in the community. My view is that I would be supporting our submission on the basis that the report says that it is not an environmental problem and it will have significant cost savings, and the use of the end products from the waste from the plant, and the benefit of not putting waste into landfill. But I'm totally relying on the consent process and the consent decision makers, having listened to all of their submitters and the science around all this, to reach their decision. So that's my comment. Let's open it for discussion. Councillor Hadfield. Let's go to Hamish first. It is your draft letter that's been put forward for discussion. I'm happy for you to speak to it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, it was couched in such a way. I've deliberately tried to, I guess, look at the wider resource recovery initiatives that we're having in place, and I too have listened, you know, acutely to the community that have expressed some concerns, and I guess one of the concerns that I've tried to address in there is this doesn't replace all of our other initiatives or everything that we're doing in terms of resource recovery and reuse. The submission, I've added in the inverted sort of pyramid, if you like, which shows the waste hierarchy. And so I guess the way that the consent's been, the way that the proposed submission has been written is it's really a complementary element to what we're already doing. And as you've pointed out, Mayor Helen, it does rely on the fact that the science has been assessed by experts, and the proposed conditions that the experts have suggested, the submission that we put together essentially endorses that those conditions would be imposed if any consent was granted, and that gives a level of safeguard and surety for the community as well. So it's quite a long-winded submission, and I guess I deliberately wanted to ensure that the wider context of our resource recovery initiatives were considered, and the reason why we would support that. But happy to answer any questions where I can. Rather than that, I'll leave it as an open discussion. Thank you.
Are we recording this because this is still an open session? I don't think it's been recorded.
Thank you. We're just checking.
It is being recorded.
Okay, we're just checking the recording did get turned back on, so it did. So that's great. Councillor Hadfield.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Look, I too obviously read this. I haven't managed to look through all of the documents from the Horizons website, all 20-something of them, but I have downloaded them and I have been scanning some of them. But the critical thing in this submission to me is the fact that the technical assessment completed by Delamore Partners and their capacity as technical experts engaged by Horizons have noted on page 3 of that, as they have now, like you, Your Worship, I'm no scientist, and I've done my best to look at the evidence that's been put forward to date. And so I think it's a very well worded submission in my view. I actually support the submission. And like many, I also tuned into both of the Zoom meetings last week and clearly formed some views from that as well. So I will be supporting this, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thank you. Hamish, just want to acknowledge you this morning and for your time crafting what is a tricky space to be in. I listened to one, I was unable to listen to both public times last week in regards to this issue. But as I listened through the second one and what I would call informal expert advice or witnesses that were speaking into it, I ran the consent through the eyes of the RMA. And if I look at part 2, purposes and principles of the RMA, sections 5 through to 8, I struggle to see how this consent will actually get any further. So I've looked at the concepts around discharge to air, and in particular dioxins, regardless of the levels and regardless of whether it's seen as effects of less than adverse. Based on that, I cannot accept and I won't support this submission. But I do understand the need to continue to look at recycling possibilities and options, and I'm fully supportive of that. But for this consent in this bioplant, I am not in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Short.
Thank you. Yes, like many of you, I viewed both the two meetings last week. I was a little bit concerned with some conflicting messages there. Bioplant Manawatu said they had a good working relationship with iwi and things were going well. And at the public meeting, one of the trustees of Aorangi Marae said, no, it's not going well and they don't want a bar of it. So there was a few things like that that did concern me. Now, I too am no scientist, but like Councillor Casey, I am one of the RMA commissioners. And there's a very famous case, King Salmon Limited, which really comes down to wording. And the wording that I don't like is actually the wording that the Delamore Partners has used. And the wording that I'm not comfortable is in the technical assessment notes that you've quoted, Hamish, it is likely that discharges to air associated with the proposal will not result in any adverse off-site effects, etc. Now, anyone working in the RMA space would know that you actually should not use the word likely because you have to be definite, and likely is not definite, and that quite concerns me. So I'm not feeling as confident about this as I was prior to the two meetings. It's a shame in a way that we're already in this space with this application, with this submission, when we're just going out with our waste minimisation plan. And one of the other things I picked up from the public meetings was the community would rather we were looking at a zero waste rather than a flatline waste chain, which this would be. So yeah, I've got more mixed views on it now than what I did.
Thank you. Any further comment? Hamish, I see you have your hand raised there.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I guess thank you to both Councillor Casey and Councillor Short. I guess recognising the language that you've referred to in the Paddle Delamore report, which I have read, they've actually suggested quite an extensive suite of conditions. They've appended it to their technical assessment. And I guess the thinking behind that is that the likeliness or not of any proposal would then be further protected by the conditions that are imposed. And obviously, if there was anything that wasn't as intended, the consent conditions of any consent that may be granted would require either the sort of cease and desist of operations or a change or effectively a shutdown of things to protect the environment. So I guess it's the proposal that's been put forward is not just a wholesale support regardless, it's reflecting on the science done by others, and essentially our submission as written would be that those conditions are imposed as well as part of our support. So I just thought I'd make reference to that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Thank you. Yeah, my support is obviously conditional upon resource consent, because it has to be, and because I want it to be as well, because I'm no scientist and I wouldn't know, but I do have confidence that the decision makers will get they'll listen to both sides of the argument, science from both sides, and make their decisions. And as our General Manager of Infrastructure has just reminded us, there'll be conditions there. So I'm happy to rely on the subject to resource consent and the conditions, but I also support any measures to decrease waste, and I think that's so the people in the community who are concerned about this plant are sort of advocating to get to zero waste. Well, that's great, but we've been told that our waste is actually, I think it's increased hugely over the last 6 years. So any initiatives to decrease waste, fantastic, but our job as a council is actually to deal with it. And at the moment, it's been increasing. This plant, if it goes ahead, would save money for the ratepayers and would considerably reduce the amount of waste that's going to landfills, which surely has got to be environmentally friendly. So, yeah, subject to us not belching out noxious fumes into the environment, I'm very happy to support it, and I'll leave it to others to decide whether that will be the case or not. Happy to support this letter.
Thank you, Councillor Quarry.
Yes, thank you. I'd agree with every word that Michael just said. Yeah, totally agree in the comments that he's made. Landfill is not the end answer to our waste problem. Dumping stuff in landfill and covering it over is not a solution. And if we can gain some benefit from that waste, zero waste is also not an end state. That will never happen. And if we can utilise it and make some benefit from it, by all means. And yeah, I fully support that. The environment commissioners that have to decide on this will make the correct answer. So yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Belsky.
Yeah, I fully support the two comments before me and Hamish's comments, but the submission's very good. But I was just wondering, Hamish, you mentioned that the plant can take tyres, and I think I'm correct there. But if it can take tyres, that is a major issue dealt with. I've got tyres up here behind my farm that's obviously they're all on solid stacks. The solid stacks are gone, but the tyres are just all over the place, and it's a major problem. And if this plant can take tyres, and then as we read in the Fielding Herald, it can produce all this petroleum and stuff like that, I can't see a zero waste ever happening. I cannot ever comprehend that. There has to be something that comes out of a waste product. But anyway, I fully support the submission. It was just the tyres that I thought you may be able to mention in the submission. That's a major issue to be dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamish.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Councillor Belsky. I do know in discussions with the company and also looking at the documentation that they've supplied to the Regional Council, they have actually excluded tyres from the initial rollout of the proposed plant. And that was in response to, I guess, some of the public feedback that they were getting and the concerns around, I guess, the perception of tyres being burnt. The technology that's been used overseas is actually the tyre recovery is a key part of it, because it's a high energy, high value kind of waste stream, if you like. So my understanding is that the company's proposal at the moment is that the consent would be granted on the basis that tyres are not part of the initial feedstock, but they would look to develop the feedstock ratios and proportions, and then within consultation with the regulator and within any consent conditions that are imposed, they would look to bring that into the waste stream at an appropriate time when everyone's comfortable that the emissions profile is as it's stated to be. But I agree. Sorry, I was going to say you're quite right, Councillor Belsky. There is a major tyre problem, and I do see longer term, if this goes ahead, it would be part of that solution.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I have reservations around my decision today in the fact that I would like a full detail of our progress with this going forward. Here we've received a late item onto our agenda today, and I don't have an issue with that, other than the fact that we received nothing prior to. It was only loaded 28 minutes prior to our meeting starting this morning, even though we'd seen it. So we've had no council communication and the brief that they give us, purpose, significance of decisions, recommendations, etc. prior to that. If we agree and vote affirmatively to this draft submission, what is the process going forward, please? I need that clarified, because at this stage, when I look back through our workshops, the 2nd of September was when Hamish first brought some detail around this pyrolysis plant to us, which was actually in a workshop format as well. We then on the 2nd of December, also in workshop, went through our waste minimisation plan. The pyrolysis plant wasn't even mentioned within that in December. And here we are now in March, seeking approval to a draft submission. And again, we haven't had the public consultation in this. Yes, there's been 2 presentations delivered. The one on the first evening, Wednesday night, I think we only had 24 or 48 hours notice prior to that actually going out to the public. I am hesitant about giving this any affirmative decision because we haven't consulted publicly and correctly through our official channels of council. So can I have some answers around that, please?
Hamish.
Thank you, Worship. I guess part of this is that council doesn't have to make a decision if we don't want to. Sorry, a submission on the proposal. It's not an MDC project as such, although I recognise that with the proposed location and waste supply and the like, there is a wider sort of public interest in council involvement. But in terms of the time frame, to be honest, the decision to make a submission, or at least propose a submission, wouldn't have made the council agenda for last Friday, which is why it's been circulated in the way that it has. But in terms of public process going forward, like I say, because it's not an MDC project, I would have thought that the publicly notified consent hearings administered by the regional council would largely be the public process around it. And then if they were to gain consent, I guess council would have the opportunity there to look at a wider public conversation around our engagement or intention. But as part of this specific process, I don't see a council's place in having a public engagement as such.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. Look, I agree with you, Hamish. I think we have an obligation to make a submission, considering our involvement in the project. Like other speakers, I have trust in the resource consenting process, and I reflect back on our own wastewater treatment plant consenting process some years ago, which at the end of, while it was lengthy, it was extensive, it was robust, and I think at the end of the day it provided a satisfactory environmental and economic outcome to the community, even though some of the opponents remain opposed to it. But at the end of the day, it was a satisfactory result. So I'll trust that the Horizons consenting process will deliver a similar fair and appropriate decision. Look, I think at the end of the day, we have to consider other options to landfill. We've only got land, sea and air. Sea's out, air, so be it. And of course, the cost benefits of the project here, I don't think should be ignored. So I'll support the submission as it is.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, just coming back to my original comments. Thanks, Hamish, for the answers. That was fine. I still come back to my question around procedures. As we started the meeting this morning, we accepted a late item, which is fine. But our agenda, which went out to the public 14 days prior, does not have any information around that on. Is there going to be an adjustment to the agenda items going forward? I'm very worried about the procedural process of this and the fact that the ratepayers will come back to us as they already have, and the fact that we were keeping this under the radar. And I can understand the commercial comments made earlier on, but this is now in a public forum. It needs to be made public. And what are our processes going forward?
Through you, Your Worship, by submitting on the consent application, by default, it is a public process. If council were to approve the submission as written, again, that is an entirely public and transparent process, so it would be a matter of public record. I guess from there, I'm honestly not sure what other processes would be you're referring to, Councillor Marsh.
Also, I understand this morning when we agreed for it to go on a late item, Ali, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you did put it up on the public agenda for this council meeting. Is that correct?
We cannot change the agenda once it's published, Your Worship, but I have put the late submission on the website. So hopefully that's showing to the public. There is a delay between loading something to the website and it going live, but it will be on the website for members of the public to see.
So if I can just answer that, I mean, I download all my agendas and all the reading documents days before our meetings and keep checking, but to have a late item put on there 28 minutes prior to it coming to a public meeting, I then had to go back onto the Teams to actually find that, because I couldn't find it in any of the documents that I downloaded. So again, the public wouldn't even have been aware of that.
Thank you. That's why we have the opportunity for late items to manage when topics come up that need to have urgent discussion. And that's the process we've followed today. Councillor Hadfield.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. Look, I'd just like to agree to that. I mean, at the end of the day, our standing orders are clear on late items. It's an agenda item, consideration of late items. We've recently had one or two cracks at that. And at the end of the day, the process is that at every meeting, there is the opportunity for anybody to put forward a late item, so long as it doesn't breach our standing orders. And in this case, it's clear that the late item, as discussed by Your Worship, fits within our standing orders. The simple fact of the matter that we don't have another council meeting prior to the 31st of March when this submission is due. So I think all process has been followed as per our standing orders. So on the basis, Your Worship, I'm actually happy to move that our council actually accepts this proposal, this submission as put forward by our infrastructure manager, and I'm happy to move that we actually submit this to Horizons.
Thank you. Councillor Belsky, is that a seconded?
Yeah, I'll certainly second that. I just want to add that on my way home from Fielding to here, there's a household that was vehemently opposed to this and had signs out on the roadside opposing it. Well, they've all gone. So I think there's been some real progress in the discussions that have been said. And in my meeting at Apathy the other night, community meeting, they were extremely for it. The whole lot were, and they said, well, you know, everyone's got rubbish, but they don't want it at their back door. But as long as it's somewhere, they're happy. But I think the way that this is done and going to be done is going to be very beneficial for our district. So I'm very, very happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I put the motion, questions or comments, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, sorry. So just a clarification. So if our draft submission is approved today and Horizons approve the process in their meeting, then the bioplant is all go. Is that correct?
Through you, Your Worship, I can probably speak to that. I think in terms of the dealings that I'm aware of with the company, and certainly the conversations that I've had, they had their three key sort of hurdles to get over to then release the capital funding from their funding partners. So we had the supply of the waste, the refuse supply agreement. There's the lease documentation and a formal lease of the property that's in question, and also the resource consent for any discharge, which is what we're talking about today. So those are the three key enablers for the company. Obviously, there's still an internal process for them to then work through the release of their capital funding from their funding partners. And I know they've got a number of different sources of capital funding in the background. And then there'll be the physical process of procuring a builder and getting on with it. But it is my understanding that those three steps are the three tick-offs for them before they then proceed. But it probably is a matter for the company to speak to. I'm just interpreting what I believe I understand.
Yeah. So again, if it's an affirmative vote for the draft submission, we're basically taking that as a recommendation for the plant to go ahead without going back to our public.
That's right.
Yep, through Your Worship, the submission's been written in such a way that it is effectively support from this organisation, subject to there being no environmental effects, with appropriate conditions in place. And the submission, the reason it's taken some time to bring together is it does show quite clearly where this fits into our wider resource management, our resource recovery and waste recovery and diversion overall strategy. So yeah.
Thank you. Right. Any further questions, comments before I put the motion? Okay.
Yes, I'd like to call for a division on this one, Your Worship.
Thank you. So let's do that. I'll put the motion. Let's call division. Councillor Hadfield? Is a yes.
It's a yes.
Councillor Marsh?
Abstaining.
Councillor Campbell? Is a yes.
Yep.
Councillor Quarry? Is a yes. Councillor Ford?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Casey? You're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, no.
That's a no. Councillor G. Taylor?
No.
And Councillor Belsky?
Yes.
Thank you. And myself is a yes. And Councillor Short? Is a no. Thank you. So that motion is carried. Thank you.
And I take it through Your Worship that those who are against it, when have abstained, that's very clearly noted in the minutes.
Correct. That's why we have division. Yes.
And yep, absolutely right to seek clarification.
Thank you. Right, so we now move to the motion to go into public excluded, and I'm happy to move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely the confirmation of minutes, the Manawatu Community Trustee recruitment decisions, and the purchase for land for a walkway and stormwater detention ponds in precinct 4. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ford. Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you.
Would someone like to move